Hello, welcome to Ferrigno Freedom channel. I'm Dante Ferrigno. I've been doing a carnivore diet known as the Lion Diet now for the past 3.5+ years, and it has changed things in my life like I never thought changing my diet would change things. But I've been talking about things that are going to help people get healthy now for a little over 3 years on YouTube, and I was very excited to see when RFK joined up with Trump that this whole idea of making America healthy again came up. So that's why I went ahead and made some merch in my own shop to support it, because I think it's a great idea that we focus on getting us healthy again. Obviously, there's a lot of areas that we need to focus attention on, but getting healthy, I mean, when you have a health problem, you really don't have any other problems. And so many of us these days are stuck with chronic conditions that are not the norm. And I saw this video that came up with RFK speaking to another doctor who came on my radar around the time of the pandemic named John Campbell. Many of you have heard of Dr. John Campbell. He's been talking about COVID all along, ever since the whole mess started. And he came from a skeptical viewpoint of it being, and he didn't really think anything bad was going on in the beginning. He was pretty confident that the medical community was trying to address this problem the proper way. Well, over time, he was able to be won over by his observations, by his own science, his own ability to test principles that were being put forth about certain things, to check emails and see what was said that was true and what wasn't said that was true, or what was said that wasn't true. All of those different things. He's been paying close attention. So it's kind of nice to see him up in a video with RFK talking about corruption in food health, which is exactly what this video is going to be about. Came out a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to go ahead and bring this video up and we'll take a look at it together. Let me go ahead and get my headphones and we'll get started. All right. I got my headphones on and now I'm ready to go, but I do want to say one more thing I forgot to mention to those who are returning to the channel. Welcome back. I'm so thankful for all of you who are here on a regular basis. Some of you have been here for the entire 3+ years I've been broadcasting about this way of eating. And I truly thank you guys, because I couldn't do this without you. I couldn't do this without all of those of you who not only watch these videos, but like and subscribe and share them with your friends. Because I'm certainly not making any positive waves on YouTube's algorithm without your help. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate the support that I get from not only my patrons, but some people just shoot me some stuff individually to help keep me going. And I appreciate that because, I got to focus energy on taking care of my family. And sometimes that takes away from what I'm doing here. And I'm sorry about that, but I've got to do what I've got to do. And I feel like it's still my mission to keep coming back and sharing the information on a carnivore way of eating and how that can change things for people. And I'm so excited to see that we have people in positions of influence, real influence, who are taking this seriously too. So when Dr. John Campbell wanted to have RFK on his show or review some of RFK's thoughts on the situation, I thought I'd really like to hear what John Campbell has to say, because he has been a well-reasoned, even-keeled thinking scientist that's looking for things that are going to help us be more healthy. And I have no complaints about that, so I want to see what they've got going on. Let's go ahead and bring them in now, and we'll take a look at this video.
Well, a warm welcome to this talk. Now, basically what I want to do today is play you some clips from the recent speech by Robert Kennedy Jr. on what is basically the health crisis in the United States, and other countries like the United Kingdom aren't that far behind. We are suffering from an epidemic stroke pandemic of preventable diseases. And this is kind of what we're looking at the moment. This is related to lifestyle. It's also related to inappropriate medical interventions. And it's related to the way that the larger influences, the corporate influences, the national influences, the corruption, the international organisations focus onto the individual in really quite an adverse way. And it's really great to hear a mainstream politician talking about this. So whether you agree with the politics or not, we're not discussing that, but we're talking about scientific points here that can be validated. Now, Mr. Kennedy actually said he can make a dramatic improvement in a couple of years to the health of Americans, and if we follow the example, the whole world, and also it can make even bigger changes within 4 years. And we did actually look at some material in the last video about particular conditions and particular lifestyle factors. And we considered that while this is not entirely feasible, we can't revolutionize the health of a country in 2 years or 4 years, we can make a massive amount of difference. We can facilitate change and make a huge difference. And many conditions that people are suffering from are reversible. And there is great advantage to lifestyle change at virtually any stage in a potential pathological disease process. So we really need to start taking much more responsibility for our own health. But it's really difficult when we have all these influences bombarding us saying, eat this ultra-processed food or take this potentially iatrogenic medical intervention. We need this combined effect of empowering the individual, but making it easier by changing the environment so that they're not pressurized. Individuals aren't pressurized to make decisions which might be convenient and give gratification in the short term, but have really quite significant deleterious medium, longer term, and to be quite honest, even short term problems of health. I mean, for example,
before he goes into that example, I do want to say that I fully agree that you can these chronic diseases can be reversed very easily. And just because the whole country is not going to get on board all at once doesn't mean you don't have to get started on doing what you can do to change things for your family, for yourself. Now, and I say yourself because everybody needs to focus on what they're doing right now, because most of us don't realize how psychologically we've been played by all the advertising, by all the chemicals, by the way these companies work. I mean, just knowing that the cigarette manufacturers bought out most of the food companies in the 1980s, and also looking at the ingredients lists on most food products that are out there, you'll realize that we are not eating just food. We're not even eating food in a lot of cases. We're eating a lot of chemicals and synthetic things that are designed to keep us barely alive, but yet have enough energy to get through the day. And in many cases, that barely even works. But you have got to simply start looking at our food supply and looking at the main ingredients. And if it's not something natural and healthy, you might as well just throw it out. And in some cases, it's hard to even know what's natural and healthy. So it's going to take some research on your part. Or you can keep it simple, especially if you've been researching the carnivore diet for any period of time. Because when I started on the lion diet, which is a very strict version of carnivore diet that only allows for animal meats that are from ruminant animals, animals that have multi-chambered stomachs that digest differently than other animals do, and they only eat grass, so that they're not omnivores and carnivores. They are specifically herbivores, the animals that I believe God made for us to be able to have here and eat, that were the cleanest meats and the healthiest meats for our bodies. And thank God for the ruminants, because it totally turned my life around. I had gut problems that I couldn't get any explanations on from doctors. I had high blood pressure and a number of other issues that I talk about in other videos that are all gone now because of the way I've changed the way I eat. I've gone from being a guy who used to wear 2X, 3X, and even occasionally 4X shirts. Now I wear medium and large shirts. I haven't worn medium anything in my entire life that I can remember. So just being able to do that has been a miracle. Some of my shirts are even small, which I don't understand because I'm still a 200-pound, 6-foot-tall guy. But the fact that I can fit in them and I've never been able to is a miracle to me. And it's all of the effects of changing the way I eat to all ruminant meat have been good. And whenever I have strayed from that, it's caused trouble. And because so much of what our food supply out there is poison for us. And that's the key you've got to get through your head, is that the stuff that you've been told is healthy is not healthy. You've got to take all that out of your head and start from scratch and start looking at things differently. At least this is my experience when I talk to people, because most people go round and round the same circles over and over in their head, thinking they got to have yogurt and they got to have nuts and fruits and berries and all these different things that are considered healthy because we've been told for 50 or 60 years that they are. but we're not told how these fruits and vegetables have been changed and how these products have ingredients in them that destroy any good properties that they might have had, or they take out the beneficial properties, like when you have skim milk and they take all the cream away. It's like you're just left with sugar water, and that's the healthy alternative. So you've got to really start over with what you think about eating in general, because most of the stuff that we eat, and I say most, I mean 95% of everything you put in your mouth is not food. It's just a food-like product. Unless you're eating all meat or all vegetables, and even the vegetables many times are just food-like products, because we've done so much crossbreeding and genetic modifications to where we've really damaged, I think, our natural supply of vegetation and fruits. So that's one of the reasons I stick with meat, but also because of the results. It's been the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. So keep it simple, eat meat. You want to get complicated and research it all, I got tons of videos for you to watch, but keep it simple, eat meat, it'll change your life. And if you want to watch my first video, 125 days on Lion Diet, you kind of see how I got started, and you got most of the information you need right there. But if you've got other questions, I got a website for that too, ferrignofreedom.com. And then we can either talk about it further ourselves, or you can check out some of my other videos and information that are available there. Meanwhile, let's keep going with Dr. John Campbell. Hey, it's Dante Ferrigno. I just wanted to thank you first of all for watching this video, but I also wanted to tell you about my merch shop. I have a link in the description for a bunch of different items I've put together for you to be able to show your support for the carnivore lifestyle, and every purchase helps me to keep doing what I'm doing here on Ferrigno Freedom.
Well, we're going to hear in this video that 30% of teenagers in the United States now have prediabetes. This is just absolutely preposterous situation. I mean, this is going to impact those young people's lives in dramatic ways and shorten those lives really quite dramatically. 20% of teenagers in the States have fatty liver disease. So fat accumulates in the liver cells when there's more fat produced than there's an exported from the cells, and the liver becomes fatty. And over time that will damage the liver, and fatty liver disease is associated with a whole range of other metabolic diseases. I mean, when I was young, we only used to see this in alcoholics, basically. Virtually didn't happen in anyone else. Now it's quite common due to primarily preposterously large sugar intakes. And we'll also hear that 80% of adults in the United States, 80% are obese or overweight. And the United Kingdom is also pretty bad. So let's just focus on some of these points. I'm not going to play the whole speech because it's not too long, but we'll play a few of the relevant parts that are really quite powerful, and then we'll probably reflect on it at the end. So just a few clips now.
Feel a moral obligation to use this opportunity to save millions of American children above all things.
Well, again, talking about millions does seem like hyperbole, overstating the case. But if you think about the percentages that we're talking about and the number of young people in the United States, then these figures do become quite reasonable. And of course, when we extrapolate that to the whole world, they're more than reasonable. And the reason I agree with this is that if we carry on as we are, this health time bomb is essentially going to go off. We have to change the way things are happening now. The status quo is not acceptable. If we have the status quo, the conveyor belt of ill health is going to result in lots of pathology and lots of premature death. We need to change things to prevent these millions of deaths.
This is an issue that affects all of us far more directly and urgently than any culture war issue, and all the other issues that we obsess on and that are tearing apart our country. This is the most important issue. Therefore, it has the potential to bring us together. So let me share a little bit about why I believe it's so urgent. Today, 2/3, we spend more on healthcare than any country on earth, twice what they pay in Europe. And yet we have the worst health outcomes of any nation in the world. We're about 79th in health outcomes behind Costa Rica and Nicaragua and Mongolia and other countries. Nobody has a chronic disease burden like we have. And during the COVID epidemic, we had the highest body count of any country in the world. We had 16% of the COVID deaths, and we only have 4.2% of the world's population. And CDC says that's because we are the sickest people on earth. We have the highest chronic disease rate on earth. And the average American who died from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. So these were people who had immune system collapse, who had mitochondrial dysfunction. And no other country has anything like this. 2/3 of American adults and children suffer from chronic health issues. 50 years ago, that number was less than 1%. So we've gone from 1% to 66%. In America, 74% of Americans are now overweight or obese, and 50% of our children. 120 years ago, when somebody was obese, they were sent to the circus. There were case reports done about them. Obesity was almost unknown. In Japan, the childhood obesity rate is 3%, compared to 50% here. Half of Americans have prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. When my uncle was president and I was a boy, juvenile diabetes was effectively non-existent. A typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes during his entire career, a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 kids who walks through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic, and the mitochondrial disorder that caused diabetes also causing Alzheimer's, which is now classified as diabetes, and it's costing this country more than our military budget every year.
Well, isn't the sheer inefficiency there interesting? So America's the first in spending on healthcare and the 79th in terms of healthcare outcomes. And COVID was a real wake-up call, wasn't it? Because the average person that died of COVID had 3.8 chronic conditions, so hypertension, obesity, dyslipidemia, whatever the chronic condition was, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, many conditions related, diabetes, many conditions related to ongoing ill health. And 1% of Americans had a chronic disease 50 years ago when JFK was president, Robert Kennedy's uncle. 66% now.
That is such a huge difference from 1% to 66% in 50, 60 years. That's crazy. Just to hear it said out loud is so shocking to me. I can barely opine on it because that is such a huge difference. And we look around and we see all these problems that need to be fixed. And most people are seeing the grand scale. They're seeing the national, the world scale of what needs to be done. And very few people have a whole lot they can do about that individually, except little things in the right direction every day. But what you can do is you can turn your own health situation around. You can lead for your family. You can lead for your community and show the way on this. If not for them, do it for yourself. Just decide that you want to live healthy, because living life without the extra burden of feeling sick from the food you eat, feeling fat and uncomfortable and unhealthy and having these comorbidities. Like he mentioned, I had several of those comorbidities back when I first started this way of eating. And I used to get sick on a regular basis. Like it was at least once a year, if not twice a year, that I had to get an antibiotic for something. I usually got the flu and or some other upper respiratory illness each year that caused me problems, whether it was the pollen or the flu virus going around. Whatever it was, I got sick on a regular basis. Last year, 2023, I got sick all of one day for the entire year, and it happened to be the last day of the year, and I was healthy by January 1st of this year. So I haven't had one sick day this year. I haven't had but one sick day last year. So that means in nearly 2 years, I've had one day of illness. And it was the same illness that my family had, and they carried around for nearly 10 or 14 days. I mean, they were coughing and having a problem with this for well over a week, And I got in and out of it in just a day. And most of the time, my family will get sick with something. I won't get sick at all anymore. My allergies are better than they used to be. We have a cat living in the house. I'm allergic to cats. So I don't know what's changed in that regard, whether it's just I got healthier and now I can handle it a little better. I used to have to take Xyzal, which at that time when I started was a heavy prescription medication for allergies. Now you can buy it over the counter. But the experience I've had since going carnivore is not experiencing all those horrible health side effects that I just got used to. I thought these are just part of life. If I'd have known it was this easy to take back, I mean, that it was well within my grasp to live my best life, I would have done it a long time before. Anyway, let's keep going and see what else he's got.
It's changed so dramatically within a lifetime. Obesity rates in children in Japan are 3%, which is bad enough. In America, it's 50%. And the United Kingdom's not that far behind. We're not doing that well either. Diabetes, pediatricians would never see type 2 diabetes 50 years ago. Now it's quite common, diabetes and pre-diabetes. Now, of course, there's always been some type 1 diabetics. So we're talking about type 2 diabetes here. Type 1 diabetes is separate. Children do get that for another set of reasons that we could talk about, but sometimes it just happens. We're talking about preventable type 2 diabetes here. Let's go on.
There's been an explosion of neurological illnesses that I never saw as a kid. ADD, ADHD, speech delay, language delay, Tourette syndrome, narcolepsy, ASD, Asperger's, autism. In the year 2000, the autism rate was 1 in 1,500. Now autism rates in kids are 1 in 36, according to CDC nationally. Nobody's talking about this. 1 in every 22 kids in California has autism. And this is a crisis that 77% of our kids are too disabled to serve in the United States military. What is happening to our country? And why isn't this in the headlines every single day?
Yeah.
There's nobody else in the world that is experiencing this. This is only happening in America. About 18%, and by the way, there has been no change in diagnosis, which the industry sometimes like to say. There has been no change in screening. This is a change in incidence. In my generation, 70-year-old men, the autism rates are about 1 in 10,000. In my kids' generation, 1 in 34. I'll repeat, in California, 1 in 22. Why are we letting this happen? Why are we allowing this to happen to our children? These are the most precious assets that we have in this country. How can we let this happen to them?
Yeah, neurological, brain, behavioural diseases, depression and anxiety. But you mentioned ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, Tourette syndrome, where you have these tics and sometimes explosive words that come out. It's kind of in the borderline really between psychological and neurological, probably more on the neurological side. Delays in learning and autism. So 70 years ago, 60, 70 years ago, 1 in 10,000. In the year 2000, 1 in 1,500. Now up to 1 in 36 and 1 in 22 in California. An explosion in the amount of autism. And he's careful, pains to add, this is not due to a change in the diagnostic criteria. This is a genuine increase. What is affecting brains?
That's a very good point, because for the longest time, I remember hearing about this rise in autism rates when my 2 children were their youngest years ago, back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I remember hearing about the increase in ADHD and autism. And I thought, they must be changing the diagnosis requirements, because nobody had all this before. And I came from the era where we drank from the water hose. There was lead in the air because there was lead in our gasoline in our cars. I mean, we were just, and smoking everywhere. We were living in probably the least healthy situation we could possibly be in, but the human body was much more resilient, it seemed like. There was a lot less cases of issues than there are today, where we've just about put out smoking. We've got the lead out of everything. Everybody's drinking purified water from a bottle now. So why aren't we healthier? Why aren't we healthier? Well, it turns out it wasn't diagnosis issues. It was the fact that we were eating stuff that's not food, and in some cases is essentially a slow-killing poison for your body. And I can't emphasize this enough, because until you break free from that cycle, until you stop giving your money to the companies who produce this garbage, it's not going to end for anyone else. It's not going to end for you, and you're not going to be able to make a dent in what's going on. It's called voting with your dollars. When you realize what's going on with the food companies and most of the advertising that we deal with on a regular basis, I'm not saying every product is no good, but most of these products that are out there are just a panacea to try to fix something. You know, I'm very skeptical of things more now than I ever was before. But I also find there's a freedom in not being captured by what all these companies claim to have for you. Because now I don't want stuff anymore. I don't want the things that they offer me to try to feel better or live better or have something better or something like that. Because I am better. Because I'm not eating the garbage that they've given me. I'm not taking the drugs that the doctors used to give me because of the problems I had from the food I was eating. It can be changed. It can be turned around. The Carnivore bar, compared to movie theater snack prices, it's no competition. With a tub of popcorn running you over $14, I'd much rather enjoy the salty, crunchy, meaty goodness of a Carnivore bar any day. And I don't have to cheat to enjoy my night out. Carnivore bar. Save 10 to 20% when you use my link in the description of this video.
Which is essentially what it means of young people. We need to find out. And the majority, 77%, not fit for military service. Absolutely quite incredible. And yet the media, the mainstream media, just isn't talking about this. It's left to people like me to talk about this, and other advocates, of course. But, you know, we're not getting this on the mainstream media. We're not getting this from mainstream politicians on either side of the pond. And one really has to wonder, why not? Why are politicians not representing and advocating for the health of the people they purport to advocate for and represent? Let's go on.
About 18% of American teens now have fatty liver disease. That's like 1 out of every 5. That disease, when I was a kid, only affected late-stage alcoholics who were elderly. Cancer rates are skyrocketing in the young and the old. Young adult cancers are up 79%. 1 in 4 American women is on antidepressant medication. 40% of teens have a mental health diagnosis. And 15% of high schoolers are on Adderall, and 500,000 children on SSRIs. So what's causing this suffering? I'll name 2 culprits. The first and the worst is ultra-processed food. About 70% of American children's diet is ultra-processed. That means industrial, manufactured in a factory. These foods consist primarily of processed sugar, ultra-processed grains, and seed oils. Laboratory scientists who many of them formerly worked for the cigarette industry, which purchased all the big food companies in the 1970s and 80s, deployed thousands of scientists to figure out new chemicals to make the food more addictive. And these ingredients didn't exist 100 years ago. Humans aren't biologically adapted to eat them. Hundreds of these chemicals are now banned in Europe, but ubiquitous in American processed foods. The second culprit is toxic chemicals in our food, in our medicine, in our environment. Pesticides, food additives, pharmaceutical drugs, and toxic waste permeate every cell of our bodies. The assault on our children's cells and hormones is unrelenting.
It's unbelievable.
To name just one problem, many of these chemicals increase estrogen. Because young children are ingesting so many of these hormone disruptors, America's puberty rate is now occurring at age 10 to 13, which is 6 years earlier than girls were reaching puberty in 1900. Our country has the earliest puberty rates of any continent on the earth. And no, this isn't because of better nutrition. This is not normal. Breast cancer is also estrogen driven, and it now strikes 1 in 8 women. We are mass poisoning all of our children and our adults. Considering the grievous human cause of this tragic epidemic of chronic disease, it seems almost crass to mention the damage it does to our economy. But I'll say, it is crippling the nation's finances. When my uncle was president, our country spent $0 on chronic disease. Today, government healthcare spending is almost all for chronic disease. And it's double the military budget. And it is the fastest growing budget item in the federal budget. And chronic disease costs more to the economy as a whole, costs at least $4 trillion, 5 times our military budget. And that's a 20% drag on everything we do and everything we aspire to. Poor and minority communities suffer disproportionately. People who worry about DEI or about bigotry of any kind, this dwarfs anything. We are poisoning the poor. We are systematically poisoning minorities across this country. Industry lobbyists have made sure that most of the food stamp lunch program, about 70% of food stamps and about 70 or 77% of school lunches are processed foods. There's no vegetables. There's nothing that you would want to eat. We are just poisoning the poor citizens, and that's why they have the highest chronic disease burden of anybody, any demographic in our country, and the highest in the world. The same food industry lobbied to make sure that nearly all agricultural subsidies go to commodity crops that are the feedstock of processed food industry. These policies are destroying small farms, and they're destroying our soils.
Well, it just goes on, doesn't it? An epidemic of fatty liver disease and all the consequences of that. More cancers, and some more unusual cancers that we used to virtually never see. Depression, mental health conditions. And you really have to wonder sometimes that are some mental health conditions and some mental health medications leading to appalling tragedies that we sometimes see related to outbreaks of violence in the United States with mass murders. Really have to ask that question there, because these ideas are coming from the mind of the murderers.
Yep.
It's a question we really need to be asking. And then he talks about the causes, ultra-processed foods, of course. And there were people moving from the tobacco addictive industry to make foods addictive. Now, some might consider this unethical. Me, for example. Hundreds of chemicals that are in food, especially in the United States, many of which make it addictive. Food should be grown in fields and farms, not in factories, as a general principle. Not always true, but nearly always true. Environmental toxins, pesticides, herbicides, over-medication, polypharmacy. Medications, of course, from the doctors are massively important sometimes. But are we over-medicating is a pretty short debate, really. Absolutely. In the United States and the United Kingdom. And estrogens, largely from environmental toxins. But estrogens, early puberty, and massive consequences of that. Young people are becoming adults at a much earlier stage of life. And again, you have to kind of think out loud, really, because the hormonal changes, that when a baby is born, most of the brain cells are developed, but they carry on dividing new brain cells up until they're about 20. And of course, things that determine things like your gender identity. I know I'm male because I've been subject to male hormones all my life, and that's formed my brain into a man's brain. If you disrupt that hormonal equilibrium when the brain is developing, who knows what could happen? We need to massively err on the side of caution on this one. And of course, the financial implications, and again, poor people very often suffer the most because they have the least choice. I think we'll just play one more section and then we'll probably leave it for today.
We give about, I think, 8 times as much in subsidies to tobacco than we do to fruits and vegetables. It makes no sense. If we want a healthy country, the good news is that we can change all this. And we can change it very, very quickly. America can get healthy again. To do that, we need to do 3 things. First, we need to root out the corruption in our health agencies. Second, we need to change incentives in our healthcare system. And third, we need to inspire Americans to get healthy again. 80% of NIH grants go to people who have conflicts of interest. These are the people, virtually everybody who sits, Joe Biden just appointed a new panel to NIH to decide the food recommendations. And they're all people who are from the industry. They're all people who are from the processed food companies. They're deciding what Americans, here is healthy. And the recommendations on the food pyramid, and what goes to our school lunch programs, what go to the program, the Swiss program, the food stamp programs. They're all corrupted and conflicted individuals. These agencies, the FDA, USDA, and CDC, all of them are controlled by giant for-profit corporations. 75% of the FDA's funding doesn't come from taxpayer, it comes from pharma. And pharma executives and consultants and lobbyists cycle in and out of these agencies. With President Trump's backing, I'm going to change that. We're going to staff these agencies with honest scientists and doctors who are free from industry funding. We're going to make sure the decisions of consumers, doctors, and patients are informed by unbiased science. A sick child is the best thing for the pharmaceutical industry. When American children or adults get sick with a chronic condition, they're put on medication for their entire life. Imagine what will happen when Medicare starts paying for Ozempic, which costs $1,500 a month, and it's being recommended for children as young as 6, all for a condition, obesity, that is completely preventable and barely even existed 100 years ago. Since 74% of Americans are obese, the cost, if all of them took their Ozempic prescription, is $3 trillion a year. This is a drug that is made by Novo Nordisk, the biggest company in Europe. It's a Danish company, and the Danish government does not recommend it. It recommends change in diet.
And the thing about that Ozempic deal is that the current healthcare people in government who are trying to work on these issues, they're working on including this Ozempic in the recent bill that they're talking about to make sure that the funding will be there for it. I mean, this is just payoffs. Corruption is the key. The one thing he said that he can probably make a difference on is dealing with the corruption. I'm not so sure about what you're going to do about getting good scientists in there, because the FDA just needs to be eliminated. Just like a lot of different agencies within the federal government need to be eliminated, because they not only don't do what they're supposed to do, they many times do the opposite of what they're supposed to do. And that to me is evidence that they need to be eliminated. Now, I am not one to want to throw the baby out with the bathwater on certain subjects, but when it comes to these agencies, I think we're going to have to start over from fresh if we even have a chance. And that's to get government out of the way, because what everybody that's done that wants to work their corruption around is they've got all their sweetheart deals in with the government plans as they are. So unless you change the actual bureaucracy itself that doesn't support all these problems, the subsidies part is a big one. And where the subsidies go is a big one. I think they already give enough subsidies to wheat and corn raising farmers out there. And I heard what he said about wanting to spend more money on subsidies for fruits and vegetables. That's definitely not the solution. I think subsidies need to get out of the picture altogether, and we should allow the market to work more, because people are going to want to be healthy. People want to eat healthy, but they're convinced that things are not healthy because we have been lied to repeatedly for so long, and that there's no punishment for the guilty parties involved in this who are profiting hand over fist on lying about their products, and people are dying as a result of it. And this is real. It's just so easy for people to gloss over because it's like it's a part of their mind that thinks this is not a real big problem. Health is the only thing you've got when you've got a health problem. That is the only consideration you have. And so many people have health problems today that they wouldn't have had if it wasn't for this food situation. We've got to do something to turn it around. Dealing with the corruption is a huge part of it. And then also encouraging people down a healthy path, I think, is the other huge part. So I'm skeptical about how much they're able to do with this from a government perspective. But taking it as the right focus is a step in the right direction. So I hope it proceeds well. But as with most things, it's probably not going to proceed as well as I would like. But as long as more people are getting aware of this situation that's going on with our food, and aware of this situation that's going on with the pharmaceutical industry, and aware of the situation of how government facilitates all this the way the current system is now, we've got to do something different. There's no doubt about it.
To treat obesity and exercise. And in our country, the recommendation now is for Ozempic to children at age 6. Novo Nordisk, the biggest company in Europe, and virtually its entire value is based upon its projections of what it's going to sell, of the Ozempic it's going to sell to America. And we have the food lobbyists have a bill in front of Congress today that is backed by the White House, backed by Vice President Harris and President Biden to allow this to happen. This $3 trillion cost that is going to bankrupt our country. For a fraction of that amount, we could buy organic food for every American family, 3 meals a day, and eliminate diabetes altogether. We're going to bring healthy food back to school lunches. We're going to stop subsidizing the worst foods with our agricultural subsidies. We're going to get toxic chemicals out of our food. We're going to reform the entire food system.
That's another
and
big
for that, we need new leadership in Washington. Because unfortunately, both the Democrats and the Republican parties are in cahoots with the big food producers, Big Pharma and Big Ag, which are among the DNC's major donors. Vice President Harris has expressed no interest in addressing this issue. 4 more years of Democratic rule will complete the consolidation of corporate and neocon power, and our children will be the ones who suffer most. I got involved with chronic disease 20 years ago, not because I chose to or wanted to. It was essentially thrust upon me. It was an issue that should have been central to the environmental movement. I was a central leader at that time. But it was widely ignored by all the institutions, including the NGOs, who should have been protecting our kids against toxins. It was an orphaned issue, and I had a weakness for orphans. I watched generations of children get sicker and sicker. I had 11 siblings, and I had 7 kids myself. I was conscious of what was happening in their classrooms and to their friends, and I watched these sick kids, these damaged kids. In that generation, almost all of them are damaged. And nobody in power seemed to care or to even notice. For 19 years.
Well, I think we'll leave Mr. Kennedy there, but rooting out corruption, absolutely essential. Changing incentives, inspiring people, getting rid of the conflicts of interest. And don't think we're squeaky clean in the UK. I mean, for example, we talked to Professor Angus Dalgleish, who's got a new treatment for cancers. It doesn't involve drugs, it just involves bacterial preparation. He's keeping his cancer patients alive. It could potentially prevent cancers and prevent a lot of infections. And doctors could prescribe this compassionately if it wasn't for the fact that the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency have refused him permission to refused him a license for it. I mean, why would they do that? Why would they do that? Why not allow doctors to make the decision? Regulators funded by for-profit industry. Sick child's actually a really good idea, because a sick child could need medication for the next 80 years every day. Think of all the money that comes in. Why not just buy food, make people healthy, rather than spend trillions on...
There you go. Why not just let us buy our own food that makes us healthy? I think that's the key thing right there, is that we just need to start buying our own food that makes us healthy. Can the government make that a little bit easier? Yes. By mostly getting out of the way, in my opinion. Getting all of their stuff out of the way, all of their laws and rules. I mean, he talked about how the doctor over there in Britain couldn't get it done because of government regulators. And that's where the problem I have with overregulation is. Putting too much faith in the regulators means it just depends on who's in charge, whether the good stuff is being done or the bad stuff is being done. I mean, when you think about a situation where if they're going to be telling us what we should and shouldn't eat, I don't want them telling us that you can't eat this or you can't eat that. It's been deemed bad, so it's bad for you. Because if they're telling me that red meat is bad, like they have been for the past 50 years, I'm going to have a real problem with that. So I hope we're very careful about how we handle the regulation side of it. It should be approached dealing with the chemical problems, but it also should be approached from a legality issue. And I truly believe that if these food companies could be held responsible for the lies that they have told over the past 50 plus years, knowing that they have paid for the results that they got, knowing that they skewed the information that was made available, then those food companies can be sued in hopefully large enough numbers to where the people who have been hurt by them can put them out of business for doing the things they've done. And hopefully other companies will come up in their place that want to make good foods available. But the bottom line is we don't have to try to solve all of these problems. You and I, we can make the decision to spend our money on the food that's going to make us and our families healthy, and then let us lead by example that way. It's great that they're talking about this on the political scene. I love the Make America Healthy Again idea. I think it's a much better focus because I've always thought America was great. I didn't think we left being great. I just think that our government is not too great lately. And hopefully we can see some changes in that area. But we can certainly see changes in our health. It can happen really fast. And it all starts with when you're ready to make a decision that you're going to change your lifestyle and start eating natural food again and see how much it can change your life. Well, that's all I got for this one, guys. I appreciate you sticking around and listening to me and watching the video together with me. I will see you next time. God bless.
If we pay extra, could we maybe get some grease or fat?
All right, I'm taking a look at some ingredients of a very popular soap that people use to wash their body with. And it talks about key ingredients: lauric acid, glycerin, and titanium dioxide. Sounds really healthy. And then there's a number of other ingredients in this soap. One of them is sodium tallowate, which is really about the only thing you need to actually have soap. So why all this other stuff? You know, I don't even want to ask why. I just want to get back to using regular soap. Soap basically just makes the particles on your skin more soluble so that they can come off easier. Another way I've heard it put that I like is it makes water wetter. And that's all it needs to do to effectively do its job. You don't have to have all these chemicals on your skin to get your skin clean. And that's what I like about Vintage Tradition Tallow Balm Soap, is it only uses tallow made from suet and extra virgin olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is that alkaline substance that gives that tallow its soapy appeal. And it does exactly what I'm looking for it to do and nothing extra. Balm is the name of this amazing bar of soap because it actually soothes and nourishes your skin instead of drying it out like other soaps that strip the skin of beneficial oils. This large, dense bar will last a long time, making it a great value. Get yours at vintagetradition.com and use my discount code Dante, D-A-N-T-E, when you order to save 10%.